I've been doing a low buy since January, and lately I've been getting a lot of questions about how my 2026 low buy has been going. So in today's video, I thought I'd share a 3-month update on my low buy, my rules and things I'm not buying, how much money I've saved and spent, and some of the surprises, aha moments, and life lessons I learned along the way. This video is going to be a long one, so grab a cup of tea, get cozy, and let's dive in. Hi there, friend, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Marissa, and this is A to Zen Life, where I share all the best tips and ideas to help you simplify your way to a home and a life you love. So be sure and hit the subscribe button and turn on all notifications if you haven't already, if that sounds like your jam. And in case this is your first video here, which this kind of would be a weird first video to see, but just in case, the backstory here is that I have been a minimalist for almost 10 years now, and I've been practicing frugal living for over 15 years. And during that time, I've either done a no buy or a low buy every single year. So needless to say, I'm a huge fan of no buys and low buys, and I love making videos like this. So the first thing I want to touch on in this video is an update on the low buy rules that I set for 2026 and how I'm doing with following them. So at the beginning of 2026, I wrote a list of rules and exceptions just like I do every single year, and I will put those over here for you so that you can see what the rules and exceptions that I set for 2026 were. And so far, I've done a really good job in sticking to those rules. And then along with those rules, I also wrote a list of 20 specific things that I was not going to buy in 2026, which I will also show over here. And so far, I have not broken any of the rules on my 2026 low buy list. The one purchase that I did make that falls under this list, as well as the exceptions that I set, was a purchase of new tennis shoes because my old tennis shoes got completely worn out and were basically falling apart after a good 3 or 4 years of daily use. So under the exceptions that I set and the rule of 5 that I'm using to guide my low buy challenge for 2026 regarding clothing and shoe purchases, I did purchase a new pair of tennis shoes to replace that old worn out pair. And if you're not familiar with the rule of 5, it's basically a guideline for sustainable fashion consumption that says that you should only be purchasing at most 5 brand new items of clothing or shoes per year. So I followed that rule last year and it was fantastic and I absolutely loved it and decided to do it again this year. And I'll make sure to link to a video up here for you about that, as well as down in the description box below. But like I said, I did activate that rule to replace those tennis shoes that had gotten completely worn out. So that means that I've used up 1 out of 5 of those exceptions for the rule of 5. And speaking of rules, we also used another minimalist rule called the 1 in, 1 out rule several times in the past 3 months because my kids are at that age where they are absolutely growing like weeds. And especially my oldest son seems to be growing out of his shoes super fast. So several times we actually had to go through their shoes, get rid of old shoes, and replace them with new shoes. What I did with those shoes is I will collect them and I will drop them off at DSW, because when you drop off shoes for donation at DSW, you earn points towards future purchases. But the hack here is that no matter if you bring in 1 pair of shoes or an entire bag full of shoes, they'll give you the exact amount of points because they only count it per day. So what I'll do is I will keep the shoes that we're donating in my car, and then when I'm running errands in that area, I will drop them off over a period of different days so that I can earn the maximum amount of points from donating the old shoes to buy new shoes. I actually meant to save the receipt and share the amount that we saved with you, but I realized I just accidentally threw it away yesterday because I was like, why am I still keeping this? But I'm pretty sure that we were able to save over $50, if not almost $100 off of shoes doing that, and then from past purchases that we had earned points towards. So after using the one in, one out rule, the shoes that were brought into our home included one pair of tennis shoes for me, two pairs of shoes for my oldest son, a pair of sandals and a pair of tennis shoes, and one pair of shoes for my youngest son, Diti. I also wanted to share this clever hack with you that one of my subscribers shared with me, which is that when your kids reach a shoe size that matches yours, it's an excellent time to get them quality shoes that they can then pass on to you. And I thought that this was so smart, but unfortunately, my oldest son's feet grew so fast, I literally missed the window of being able to take his shoes. But I think that when he's outgrown his sandals, my husband can actually wear them if younger brother doesn't steal them first. Along with my low buy year, I also tackled some significant decluttering and organizing projects from January to March. And some of the things that I've decluttered have included old calendars and school planners that my kids didn't use, and some broken or chipped kitchen items, such as a water bottle that my son got from a birthday party that he went to that always ended up leaking, as well as some bowls and plates. And then also in the kitchen, we got rid of some unwanted food and spices in our pantry, refrigerator, and cabinets. And besides decluttering, I've also been selling off some of the unwanted clutter in our home that I had been procrastinating about for a while. Like, for example, the old vintage audio equipment that the previous owners of our home left when they moved out. And I had been procrastinating about it. I had contacted some secondhand audio stores, but wasn't really happy with the lowball offers that they were giving me. So I finally decided that in 2026, I was going to sell all of that stuff off by the end of the year, no matter what. And I'm happy to say it's been going amazing. And I think with the way that the economy is going and how inflation and cost of living are skyrocketing, a lot of other people that I know are feeling the exact same way and having great results with selling off their stuff. For example, just yesterday, one of my students in my decluttering course commented that since January, she's made almost $5,000 selling off the unwanted clutter that she has been going through in her home. Also, can I just point out the part where she admitted she was afraid she might miss some of these things when she let go of them, only to realize that she hasn't regretted decluttering any of that stuff and instead has been filled with positivity, gratitude, and joy about letting them go. I actually read a statistic the other day that said the average person has around $7,000 of unwanted clutter in their home that they could cash in on if they were just willing to let go of it. But of course, decluttering isn't just about the money. It's also about the freedom and peace of mind that you get from letting go of this stuff that you don't really use or need or enjoy in your home, which just frees up so much time, energy, and just peace of mind for other things that are honestly a lot more enjoyable in life. So if your 2026 goals involve decluttering, organizing, or simplifying your home, life, and finances in any way, I just wanted to remind you that right now my Clutter GPS course is on sale, and that sale ends tonight at midnight. So be sure and join that if you're interested. And not only will you get my 5-star rated decluttering course, but you'll also get hundreds of dollars in free bonuses, including my 50-page minimalist budget bundle with all of my no spend challenge printables and intentional spending printables, as well as a bonus mini course that you'll get for free on how to get rid of and sell your clutter if you're interested in cashing in on some of the money that you have lying around your home. And if you do the math, this course can more than pay for itself in just a few weeks or months with all of the money you can save and make with all of the knowledge, tips, and strategies I share in there. So I will be sure to put a link to my course down in the description box and pinned comment below in case you're interested in checking it out. And I can't wait to see how much you and I can accomplish together if you decide to sign up for my course. But speaking about goals, another thing that I did in the past few months was I reset my goals and my vision board for 2026. And the other day, my husband was in my office and he was looking at the vision board after I finished it. And he said, I feel like you have so much more on your vision board compared to last year, which I guess isn't very minimalist of me. But I have to say, I feel like now that we've finally gotten settled into our new home and our new life here, I feel like I just have so much more energy and creativity overflowing to focus on exciting things that I felt like I didn't have the time or energy for previously. Those of you who have been following me for a long time will recognize that there are some things that I've had on my vision board for years, like this card that I got from my mother before she passed away when I was 9 that reads, "May all of your dreams come true." This is related to a dream I have. This is my favorite flower. But then a lot of things on here are completely new and related to new goals I have for the year. For example, I set the goal that I was going to walk 10,000 steps a day, and I have been doing that for the past 60 plus days and have absolutely loved the results. I'm super excited about the new Avatar movie coming out soon. I'm also excited about the Demon Slayer Infinity Castle movie that's coming out that I haven't seen yet. And this is from my youngest son's Halloween costume last year. So since he's not using it, I decided to hang them on my vision board. I have the goal of reading more this year, and I love squirrels, like the OGs. If you know, you know. I have a goal of busting through my excuses and doing more strength training. I have some creative and mental goals for myself. So I just look at this and I feel so inspired and motivated to work towards my goals. And speaking of my goal of walking 10,000 steps every day, that's the fifth thing that I wanted to talk about with you, because one of the reasons I was able to do that despite the horrible, horrible weather that we have here in the Chicago area is I got a walking pad that I actually purchased with the money that I saved from last year's low buy slash no buy. So after being super, super good about sticking to my no buy and low buy rules last year and saving over $15,000 with that, I treated myself to the walking pad that had been on my wish list for over 2 years. And I have to say, I'm absolutely loving it. And I already did a video that I will be sure to link up here to you where I shared the results from walking 10,000 steps every day for 30 days. But I think that that walking pad is a great example of how low buys also help you just be a lot more intentional with your purchases and experience greater satisfaction when you actually do go ahead with buying something, because you're much less likely to be doing it on impulse, and it's more likely to be something that you've really thought through and you've budgeted for, you've saved for. So when you finally do get it, it's just so, so satisfying. But not every experiment for low buys and no buys turns out so well. Like, for example, the sixth thing that I wanted to talk about was the Sperry's that I was initially going to declutter and then ended up repurposing, because initially when I got my walking pad, I found that my feet and ankles weren't really used to all of that walking, and they were kind of hurting when I was doing so much walking on my walking pad. So I thought it might be a good idea to try repurposing the Sperry's that I didn't want to wear outside for indoor use on my walking pad. And although I gave it the good old-fashioned college try, unfortunately, they did end up giving me even worse foot and ankle pain, which is something that some of my followers actually commented on my previous videos to warn me about and tell me that it probably wasn't a good idea. But luckily, in the meantime, from all of that continued walking, my feet and my legs got stronger and stronger. And so I found that I no longer even need to wear shoes on my walking pad. And I'm actually okay with going barefoot or in socks now. So I decided that I am going to go ahead and donate those shoes to DSW, like I mentioned in one of the previous talking points, and get the points for that to put towards some other pairs of shoes, either for myself or for my family. Because I have to say, I'm actually in desperate need of some new shoes, because pretty much at this point, all I have are one pair of 15-year-old UGG boots that I wear in the cold weather and that new pair of sneakers that I just got. And I for sure need a new pair of sandals, because my old pair wore out and my heels are starting to slip off of them. And then I could also use another pair of walking shoes. So I'm definitely going to have to buy some new shoes and activate the rule of 5 again for some replacement pair of shoes in the future. Next up, I want to highlight some of the things that I resisted purchasing between January and March, because not giving in to impulse purchases is one of the biggest habits that has saved me thousands of dollars every single year. And the things that I resisted purchasing in January alone include a calla lily water fountain that I saw at Costco that would have cost $239.99, a ceramic incense burner that was made to look like the Pokemon coughing that would have cost $54. And continuing with the theme of adorable things that I am attracted to but don't really need to buy include not one but two lobster stuffed animals that I saw, as well as a stuffed animal that looked like a water bear. And what's funny about this is that I think that my youngest son, Didi, has rubbed off on me, because he is the one in our family that likes these really weird and random animals. Like for Christmas one year, I got him this stuffed oxalotl, which he absolutely adores. So when I was looking at these stuffed animals and the water bear in particular, I was thinking about Didi and how much he's talked to me about water bears and how we've read about water bears in books from the library and whatnot. And I was so tempted to buy it. And then another purchase I resisted was some lip tint in the color peony that I also saw on Instagram. And what happened was I saw this funny reel on Instagram of a husband accidentally putting on his wife's lip tint, not realizing that it was tinted. And that video ended up getting hundreds of thousands of likes. But I actually started to wonder, was it actually an accident or was it really good marketing? And that leads me to point number 8, which is an aha moment that I had about the most dangerous kind of influence. Sometimes when you see these things that appear like they're an accident or happen completely at random, are actually very intentional marketing tactics that are directed to get you to buy their products or services. And even though I'm someone who doesn't even wear lip tints or lipsticks and hasn't for years, I ended up going down a rabbit hole researching that lip tint and that brand to see if it might be right for me, because that accidental advertising caught my attention so effectively. And I think it's really important for us to be aware just how susceptible we humans are to being influenced by these seemingly random or accidental or off the cuff and natural marketing and advertising instances, because a lot of the times they're not as random and accidental as they seem. And speaking of which, that actually leads me to the next topic I wanted to discuss with you on this list, which are some things that I learned in a book called Wanting by Luke Burgess. So in one of my previous no buy videos last year, I actually talked about this realization that I had, where I realized that I would see something and I would want it, but then because I didn't give in to the impulse, I felt like my obsession ramped up and then the curve gradually fell off over time, but I couldn't find any studies or research or psychological explanations for this phenomenon until I read the book Wanting, about this theory of mimetic desire. So in this book, the author shares a story about the so-called godfather of modern day marketing, who was actually the nephew of oh my. Hey y'all, sorry for that quick interruption, but my neighbor had an army of gardeners over leaf blowing his yard to do some spring cleaning, and things got just a little bit too loud for me to continue. So it is the next day, but we're still going to pick up right where we left off, which was talking about the theory of mimetic desire. And I was just about to tell you about Edward Bernays, who was actually the nephew of Sigmund Freud and who has come to be known as the father of marketing. And in the book Wanting, the author shares the story of how Edward Bernays in 1929 engineered a landmark propaganda campaign for the American Tobacco Company, who wanted to cash in on the yet untapped market of female smokers. Because at that time, even though it was common to see men smoking, public smoking was considered unattractive, unladylike, and basically taboo for women. So what Edward Bernays did was he staged a dramatic display at the Easter Sunday parade in New York City, where fashionable and attractive women marched and publicly smoked in the parade, while framing their cigarettes as torches of freedom. And not only that, he also planted other women in the crowd who were instructed to pull out their own cigarettes and start smoking, but make it look like they were spontaneously joining in the movement, when the truth is the whole thing was planned all along. So basically, the book Wanting explores the theory of mimetic desire and the idea that human desires are not authentic or internally generated, but rather are imitated from others. And it was originally developed by the philosopher Rene Girard, and his theory posits that we adopt the desires of models, aka people who we look up to, and want things simply because others want them. And I think this book is definitely worth checking out if you're interested in the psychology of human desire and why we want the things we do. And now, speaking of books, I thought that we might dive into the books I read, listened to as audiobooks, or abandoned in the past 3 months of my low buy. So, here are just a few of the books that we have right now that I wanted to discuss with you. And for this, I'm going to need the notes that I made about my reading list on my phone. Okay, so in January, I listened to the audiobook that I just mentioned, which was Wanting by Luke Burgess. I also reread the book The Art of Spending Money by Morgan Housel, which I borrowed as a audiobook and an actual physical book from the library during last year's low buy slash no buy. And I liked it so much that I ended up getting myself a physical copy. So I revisited this in January. In February, I was really interested in the topic of discipline because, like I mentioned previously, I was doing a 10,000 steps a day walking challenge, and I was just trying to be overall more disciplined, not just with my physical fitness, but also with my mental discipline. And so I borrowed an audiobook from Libby called Discipline is Destiny by Ryan Holiday, who also shares videos here on YouTube and has over 1 million followers. And I didn't realize when I borrowed it, but this book is actually the second in a series of 4 on the principles of Stoicism. But I ended up liking that audiobook so much. In March, I borrowed it as a physical copy and I'm revisiting it again. So I am definitely inspired to go check out his other books because this one was so good. But then besides Discipline is Destiny, I also borrowed another library book called Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. And I ended up abandoning that library book because to me, it was just too harsh. It just leaned too much towards kind of this, how can I say this? For me, Can't Hurt Me kind of framed discipline more as a form of self-punishment and almost torturous versus with Discipline is Destiny. It's more about this kind of inner peace. And I guess I could kind of call it soft discipline. I don't particularly consider myself a very soft or feminine person either, but this kind of idea and distinction of soft discipline versus hard discipline has really been on my mind the past few months. And I think that's why this book really resonated with me, whereas Can't Hurt Me didn't so much. Continuing with the theme of discipline, a book called The Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter, which I ended up borrowing as a Libby audiobook. And I also abandoned that book because, again, I felt as though it was more of like a hard discipline, and the guy was talking about going out into the wilderness and hunting and all of this stuff that I have absolutely zero interest in. So I abandoned that book very, very quickly. And then, based on what I learned when I was reading and listening to this book, I also decided to borrow Meditations by Marcus Aurelius from Libby as well. And I also found that a very, very inspiring book. And I'm trying to get my hands on a physical copy. I'm in line at the library right now because it's definitely something I'm interested in revisiting and taking a closer look at. And actually, speaking of the book, Discipline is Destiny, I wanted to share a quote with you that I found really, really inspiring related to the idea of non-essential spending that I think could help us when we are trying to do low buys or no buys, and just to be more intentional spenders in general, which is,
I would die without my insert luxury item, will say in jest. How can anyone live like this? Will ask, not so rhetorically. The answer? They're stronger than you. The more a man is, the editor Maxwell Perkins had inscribed on his mantle, the less he wants. When you strip away the unnecessary and the excessive, what's left is you. What's left is what's important. How do you know if something is superfluous? Well, one indication can be how hard other people are pushing it on you. The insecure constantly pressure us to be like them. Another is how much your interest is motivated by keeping up or fear of missing out. Ask yourself, haven't I and humanity survived quite a long time without this? How did it go last time I got the thing I craved? How long did the feeling last compared to the buyer's remorse? And how will you know that this thing won't actually make your life easier? Because the last thing didn't either. Go check your junk drawer or the back of your closet for proof.
And then I also just wanted to quickly mention something else that's had me really excited the past few months, which is that I have been borrowing books that I loved when I was growing up and reading them with my kids. So we borrowed Redwall, and my kids are absolutely loving this. And I am so excited to be reading this together as a family because I love this book so much growing up, and now I'm so excited to be able to share it with my kids. And those of you who have been around a long time know that I did a lot of decluttering and getting rid of stuff, but I've only shared once or twice before that a lot of the books that were my most favorite and beloved books were actually lost in a house fire when I was in my early 20s. And at one point I had pretty much, I think, all of the books that were in this series, and those were lost in the house fire, which was very, very traumatic for me. And then some other books that we also checked out from the library were these Magic Eye books. Who else grew up with these, right? Aren't these amazing? Who else's eye doctor had these as huge pictures on the wall when they were growing up? You know what's funny is my youngest son is super, super good at these. Like it just takes him a couple seconds and he can find the image. And my oldest son can't see them at all. And I'm somewhere in the middle. But we had a lot of fun going through these and trying to find the secret images inside. And then another thing I wanted to touch on is my philosophy as a minimalist towards children's books, because I think that a lot of people think that I'm completely anti-ownership and anti-owning physical books, but that's not the case at all. In my opinion, the library is just such a fantastic resource. For us, it makes more sense to borrow books that we're interested in from the library first, and then if we really love them, and especially if we find ourselves rereading them and checking them out multiple times, then we can consider buying them and bringing them into our home as physical books. So my example for you here is this book that's called the Wilderlore series by Amanda Foody, and my youngest son got obsessed with these books. He just randomly grabbed the first one off the shelf at the library a while back, and then he devoured the rest of the series. So he actually has borrowed the entire series several times from the library. So because he loves this series and has reread it so often, I decided to buy the entire series for him for his birthday so that he could have his own copies at home. And actually, not only does my youngest son, who is 11, love it, but my 13-year-old also loved it. And they told me that I needed to read it myself. So I just finished the second book. And I have to say, I feel like this series is really underrated. It's kind of like Avatar meets Harry Potter vibes, maybe. That's how I would describe it. Speaking of the library, we've also been continuing our habit of borrowing movies from the library, because one of the things that I did last year during our no-buy was to cut my streaming services so that we weren't paying $20+ a month for those things. And I have to say, one of the best movies that we watched as a family was the Paddington series, which is so, so good. I totally underestimated how amazing Paddington was. And everyone in our family completely loved it from the very first movie. We ended up binge watching it back to back to back. Even my husband loved it. It's just so fun and whimsical and magical. And speaking of my husband, another thing that happened in the past 3 months of our low buy was I did a video talking about this analog movement that's been trending. And during the course of making that video, we were talking about my husband's old iPod, and he felt so inspired to pull it out and charge it and start listening to the songs on his iPod again. And my kids were so excited to see it and use this ancient technology. And it's funny because I got my husband this, I think it must have been over 15 years ago, and yet it still works perfectly well. Another thing that's made our 2026 low buy super fun is experimenting with new recipes. So far, I've made a easy cheesecake recipe that is low fat, high in protein, and low in sugar so that it's a little bit healthier. It's even healthy enough that sometimes we'll have it for breakfast. And I also made smashed chicken tacos, which our family has become obsessed with, and they are so, so easy and delicious. And besides that, because I ran out of the old spice mixture that I used for my homemade popcorn and I couldn't find it at any store no matter how hard I looked, I ended up trying a new flavor called umami mushroom that I found at the store, and it is just absolutely fabulous. So we enjoyed that. Also, another recipe I decided to try right in the middle of making this video was the viral dumpling lasagna that's been going around and trending on social media. And since my husband is Chinese and we eat dumplings quite often, we already had all of the ingredients on hand. We just swapped out pork for beef instead. And I have to say, I'm pretty impressed with how it turned out. And this is definitely something that we're going to be making again. But when I was shooting the B-roll for this video, I told my husband that people were going to think that we're completely unhinged for eating huge whole tomatoes along with this food. So I ended up cutting my tomatoes into smaller pieces, but I don't know. What do you guys think? Is it normal to just eat a huge tomato like an apple, or would you rather cut it up? Let me know what you think down below. I also experimented with making a nata colada recipe for my kids. And if you're not familiar with this term, it's basically a pina colada without alcohol. And it was something that I always loved getting when I was growing up. Whenever it was my birthday and I wanted Mexican food, my dad would always let me order a nata colada to have with my meal. So I wanted to try and make it at home for my kids, and they really, really enjoyed it. And then another new recipe I tried was making cornbread in my cast iron skillet for the first time, which usually I would make cornbread muffins in the past, but I really wanted to experiment with new recipes in my skillet, and I have to say it turned out absolutely amazing. Speaking of my cast iron skillet, that was actually something that I purchased during last year's no buy when my nonstick pan got worn out and needed to be replaced. And almost every time we use that pan, my husband talks about how it's one of the best purchases we've ever made. So I think that's a great example of how no buys and low buys aren't just about saving money, but they're also about spending money with greater intention. So with that in mind, here are a few of the best things that we purchased during the past 3 months of our low buy. Starting with this strap that I got to replace the old strap from my yoga mat. And I purchased this yoga mat over 2 years ago, but what I couldn't stand about it was it had this really flimsy strap that just got really twisted up, and it was falling apart and fraying, and it was just really low quality. So this thing had been driving me crazy for a long time. So I ended up purchasing a cotton canvas replacement strap. And even though it only cost $5.99, this has already improved my quality of life so much, I'm honestly regretting not buying it a long time ago. Another fantastic purchase we made was a replacement gasket for the inside of our toilet. So a few months back, we had this issue where the toilet off of our main bedroom would intermittently just start running, and it wasn't super loud, but especially when you were trying to sleep at night, it was enough noise that it was really disturbing. And towards the end of last year, it started getting really bad. At first, I thought we were going to have to call a plumber and spend hundreds of dollars to get the issue fixed. But my husband started messing with it and realized that one of the gaskets had gotten kind of this calcification on it. So he tried a couple things. He tried twisting it, he tried putting vinegar in the bowl so that it would dissolve it, and none of that worked. So we ended up spending $30 to get a replacement gasket and switching it out, and that completely solved the issue. And we have had a much better night's sleep since then. So that was money well spent. Another purchase I made that you've seen featured in a lot of my recent videos was this tiny little microphone that you see here clipped to my sweater. Oh, I just realized I took a drink of water and I spilled water on myself. Whoops. So one of the biggest complaints I've always gotten on my channel is that there's too many echoes and the sound quality is not good. So at the recommendation of my friend, Christina Mijas, I ended up getting this little miniature microphone that you can either clip on, or right now I'm using a magnet on the inside of my sweater that holds it in place. And it comes with two different ones and this fuzzy thing that's good for when you're outside, but I just like the fuzziness and the way that it looks, so I use it all the time. And I've gotten feedback that the audio quality has vastly improved since I started using this, but people hate it when I hold it and speak with it, which sometimes I like clipping it on, sometimes I like holding it. It just depends on how I feel. So I personally feel it's not that big of a deal, but I don't know. Some people are weird about certain things. And then we also got 2 sets of safety lights for our boys' bicycles because our area doesn't really have good lighting when it gets dark. And a lot of times the kids are out playing outside until dusk. And so we want them to be safe when they're riding home from their friend's house in the neighborhood. And those safety lights were really, really cheap and they've been fantastic. Another small purchase that has really made a huge difference in my life is this pedometer that I used for my 10,000 steps walking challenge. And initially I was clipping it to my pocket or my pants, but I realized it was making it worn out. So what I do now is I just slide it into my pocket and I walk with it throughout the day. And it is a great way of keeping track of my steps. I've also talked many, many times about how I'm a huge fan of these erasable pins from Pilot. They're called the Pilot Friction pins. And I love them because they're colorful and you can erase them if you make a mistake, which I tend to make a lot of mistakes when I'm writing. So these all ended up running out and I got a replacement set, but I realized that they actually had a set that is not just erasable, but the ink is also replaceable, the cartridges inside. So I got a set of 15 colors and I'm really excited to start using them, see how long they last, and hopefully just need to buy the replacement cartridges from now on. Whenever I do any budgeting or habit tracking or my meal planning, I always like to use these colored pens because they just make it a little bit more fun and exciting. So this is definitely something that I have loved and used for many, many years. And then finally, the last purchase was some fake plants that I got from IKEA or from sourcing locally on Facebook Marketplace. And that actually brings me to the next thing I wanted to talk about, because I know there's this whole debate about real plants versus fake plants, especially in the minimalist community. It feels like every single minimalist has the most wonderful green thumb that I am honestly just so jealous of. But honestly, I like fake plants because I feel like they reduce the mental load of having to pay attention to taking care of plants, watering them, making sure they're getting enough sunlight and things like that. As you can see, this snake plant behind me is real and it's absolutely thriving. It's actually grown so much since we moved into our home and we purchased it early on. And we have some jade plants in our living room that are also doing well. But then last year we had gotten a fiddle leaf fig tree for our dining room and it lost so many leaves and I'm constantly worried about whether or not it's going to die. And I actually mentioned that in the video where I was talking about the things I was decluttering because I was so worried about that darn tree. I was collecting and hoarding all of the dead leaves that fell off of it and keeping them in a box to count. And I think by the time I ended up deciding to let go, we were over 30 leaves. And since then, it's just continued to drop leaves. And that darn thing stresses me out every time I look at it. And I told my husband, if that thing dies, I'm gonna replace it with a fake tree in that corner. So I definitely have a minor case of imposter syndrome because it feels like every minimalist and their brother is so good with real plants and has an abundance of them. But as for me, it's fake plants all the way, baby. One of the projects I put on pause due to our no-buy last year was a project related to decluttering and organizing my boys' shared bedroom. And I'm happy to say I did get that project checked off the list for this year. And I actually made an entire video about that, along with some tips and mistakes to avoid when you're decluttering and organizing your own kids' bedroom. So I will be sure to link that up here for you in the right-hand corner. But I have to say, it felt so good to finally get that project done, and the boys love how it turned out. And speaking of unfinished projects, another thing that didn't turn out so well for me due to last year's no-buy/low buy is a project that I wanted to DIY in my living room, which was to use some old pillows that I had and turn them into throw pillows for our couch. And after keeping my eyes out for a long time, what I finally settled on was the idea that I just love the towels that we have in our bathroom so much. I was like, why not just get some more of these olive green towels from IKEA and use those for our living room couch instead? But what I realized when I finally did end up going to IKEA was that those towels are no longer in stock and they've been discontinued. So I know that one thing that people struggle with when it comes to no buys and low buys is FOMO and this fear of missing out on something like a must-have item that they might no longer be able to get their hands on if they don't buy it right at that moment, or the latest trend, or something that's on a really big sale or discount. And in my case, that actually happened to me. But honestly, even though I had a little bit of FOMO over this, that not giving in to impulse spending and buying a bunch of extras and falling into scarcity mindset and stockpiling and hoarding things has saved me so much money and benefited my life so much that this one small instance of FOMO doesn't outweigh all the good that it's done me over the years. If there's one thing that I've learned for certain over the years is there's always going to be new products and sales. So even though I wasn't able to find the towels that I wanted while I was at IKEA, I stumbled upon this absolutely gorgeous throw pillow cover there instead, and I absolutely fell in love with it, and I knew it was just perfect for our living room couch. So the story here is that we got a set of 4 free pillows when we got the mattresses for the home that we currently live in. They were complimentary with our purchase. So since then, I've been keeping my eye out on something that I could use to cover those pillows for our couch. And as you can see, it fits perfectly inside this throw pillow cover from IKEA, and I absolutely love how it looks on our couch. And finally, the last thing I wanted to talk about was the importance of connecting with people and building a sense of community whenever you're doing a low buy or no buy. Because, like the saying goes, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And when you're trying to make big life changes, especially if they're new to you, it's important to surround yourself with people who inspire you, lift you up, and cheer you on instead of criticizing you and dragging you down. And actually, speaking of community, I'm always so excited when I get to read your tips and ideas and hacks around minimalism or frugal living or low buys or no buys. So if you have anything to share that you didn't hear me mention in this video, please drop me a comment down below and let me know. And if you're interested in exploring the topics of low buys or no buys more, be sure and go check out one of these videos that YouTube thinks that you'll like, or I'll see you next week. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.